Welcome to Senior Living Marketing Perspectives. I'm Debbie Howard, co-founder of Senior Living Smart. And today I have a great pleasure of talking to Hollie Kemp, who is the Chief Operating Officer of Sagely. Welcome, Hollie.
Hi, Debbie. Great to chat with you.
Great to chat with you. Now, we go way back, right? We go back to the days we both worked at Emeritus, and I don't think we knew how good we had it.
No, we did not. Such a great company, such a good family, but I love that we've been able to maintain our connection. So
yeah. I think we Emeritans really stay in touch. So I was glad to see you kind of, go from the kind of the operator provider side over to, more of a solutions partner and technology side. Obviously, I did the same thing. And, I just feel like that perspective of really having worked in the communities, interacted with residents and families, just so informs, strategy and decisions. So in case people don't know kind of about you and about Sagely, I'd love for you just to give us a little bit of background.
Yeah, so I started in senior housing as a caregiver unit assistant many moons ago, so almost over 20 years ago, and I fell in love with senior housing. I already, had a passion for seniors and connection, and throughout my career, I served in various roles throughout the industry, from caregiver, up through chief experience officer, and kind of every level in between. And my primary focus has always been on memory care and engagement, and I dabbled in operations, but my passion really is that lifestyle and creating that quality of life. And just over a year ago, I actually joined the Sagely team. So I was a fan of the product before I joined. So I used Sagely to measure my own success with our teams as we were rolling out programs, and really to make sure that our family stayed connected. So Sagely is an engagement platform, so we're able to meet all of the community's engagement needs and directly connect the resident and the family via apps. So we do everything from in-room, cable TV, a dedicated channel so you can do programming and touch your residents, to an app for families, an app for residents, your calendar, your newsletter. So it's really a one-stop shop. And that was something that was super important to me, knowing, the staffing in engagement or memory care tends to be somewhat limited, and, they're pressed for time and they're trying to meet the needs of, 100 plus residents in a community. I really wanted an efficient tool that drove that engagement. And so that's how I found Sagely. And then of course I joined the company, and it's been a great journey because, like you said, I think I've been able to really bring that other kind of perspective that, this is what it's really like to, deliver engagement programs in a community. And this little tweak matters. And here's why it matters. And things like our daily calendar, being able to print a daily calendar for a community team member instead of having to retype their monthly every day seems really minor, but residents like that daily. And so, it saves so much time, right? So it's those little kind of tweaks or additions that have made all the difference. Or in COVID, saying, we've got to meet the resident where they are. And so we developed our in-room TV solution and said, we believe this is a game changer forever, not just for COVID, because now you're meeting residents where they are. Instead of saying you have to come to me, we're going to say wherever you are, we're going to, meet you there. We're going to engage. We're going to socialize. We're going to keep you, in a place where you feel really good about your hobbies and your interests. So yeah, it's been great.
Wow. What amazing timing. You could never have predicted, none of us could, COVID, and, COVID's been described as a change agent, a disruptor, and an accelerator. And I think it's all of those things. Mm-hmm. But what has it been to you and to Sagely in maybe how you're looking at product development or engagement, maybe differently, and how that might inform, your future, or looking at the industry, how we as an industry may continue to evolve our definition of engagement?
Yeah, so I definitely think it's been an accelerator. So it's really, in a good way, forced us to say, okay, what are we doing, and how can we do it more effectively, more efficiently, and how can we get back really to this one part of our mission? So our mission is to keep elders happy, healthy, independent, and connected. And when I think about that, I think, well, how do we do that in senior housing? And one of the ways, well, there's two main ways in my mind. One is to actually directly touch the resident themselves, right? So start to make a technology that's simple enough for a resident who maybe isn't tech savvy, maybe even a little bit fearful of technology, but easy enough for them to use and start to grow and love. And then the second piece is, how do you free up more time and also provide more efficient tools for that engagement director to meet their residents' needs at all times? Because, it's COVID now, but I can think back, Debbie, to being an executive director in a community and dealing with H1N1 or dealing with MRSA or dealing with other things that, like the flu, that actually do lock down your community. Certainly not to the extent that COVID has, right? But you go into those quarantine situations. I can remember us delivering all of our meals, pre-packaged, the PPE, the whole 9 yards, right? And I remember we delivered personalized activity kits to the resident apartments. We didn't have that option for TV at that time. And I think, it's interesting because you might actually reach more people because you're opening your mind during a time like that than you do in your traditional times. Because you and I both know how many people usually come to your engagement programs or your activities in a day. 10 core people usually, right? Out of all.
Yes. Yeah.
And so what about the other 90 that live in your community? And now you're touching those people every day, and maybe in a way that actually works better for them, right? Like, not everybody's social, not everybody's a joiner. And so now I get things delivered to me that are meaningful, or I get to participate in them on my time, and I think that independence, like that choice, that piece, I think has been really positive, because residents get to really experience life on their terms, if you will.
Right. Everyone's looking for choice. So it sounds like this kind of hybrid model is probably here to stay, even when we can open up those common areas and have larger groups, that there may still be people that say, I want to do my fitness workout, in my sweats and my jammies and with no makeup in front of my TV.
Yeah.
And still see my friends.
Why not, right? Because, but I want to do it with my person. So that's what I love about technology, that you can actually still personalize it, right? Because I feel, for me, and I think we've seen this with our residents and with the providers we work with, that it's very different to watch somebody you don't know, who's your instructor, versus your person. If you go to see a personal trainer, or, if you usually go to a yoga class and that's your instructor, or whatever it might be. In this case, it's that, it could be their physical therapist, their fitness instructor, their engagement director. That's their person. So I think that's a different experience. There's a social component to it. There's a familiarity to it. And I think that's crucial. It's key to the engagement. And I think for the resident and for the team member, what's the big deal if you put a camera up? You're running the program anyway,
Right.
So it opens those options up for everybody to participate.
Yeah. So, I think about residents in COVID and the families at home who just have so missed visiting and interacting. And I have to tell you, I'm doing a project for one of my clients who turns out is one of your clients as well. And they just asked me to have like these mini focus groups. It was over Zoom. I sent out a link. They selected some family members that were having a great experience of their communities and their brand. And I was just trying to understand, why did they select that community? How can we develop really good content and relevant information for families who are going through this decision without being able to visit the community, right? They can't tour, they can't come for lunch, can't come for an open house. Like, all of those touch points in marketing are not happening. So we're just trying to figure out, if they today had to make that decision, what would be important to them. And we had some great conversations. And this was not a sagely project. It was just totally about, what made their experience with this brand so positive. And I would say about 80% of them brought up sagely as being something that, especially now, just gave them comfort and gave them a sense of connection. And one of them made the funniest comment. She said, I also want you to know that it's real, because some days I get a report that my mom isn't participating.
Yes.
And her engagement level has gone down, and I get a little worried. And then I see her engagement level has come back up. So I know that it's not, just like marketing fluff. And I just thought that was so funny and so authentic. So maybe you can just, touch on on that part of it, because at the beginning of COVID, the objection to moving in was safety and security. Are they going to get sick? How are you going to protect them? Do you have enough PPE? It was all of that.
Sure.
Now, I'd say probably 4 months ago, it flipped to, God bless you.
Thank you.
It totally flipped to how, I'm not going to be able to see them. Bless you.
Sorry.
How are we going to stay connected if I can't see them? What's the experience going to be like for them? So I'd love to hear, kind of from your perspective, since this is a marketing show. How all that ties in and how operators can leverage a solution like that to help overcome objections for people delaying moving in.
Yeah, it's funny. So I was thinking about something that you taught me, Debbie, a long time ago recently. And you used to say something I thought was really interesting for marketing. You said, we have to figure out how to sell a product that people don't really want, right? It's not something that people go out and say, oh, I want to go buy assisted living today or memory care today. It's something that people almost probably dread that point where you have to make that decision, right? And so I was thinking about, wow, okay, so now you enter in COVID, and now it's not something that I don't want. It's probably something I fear, and I'm afraid of. And so then I start thinking about that connection piece and using a vehicle like Sagely. And I love hearing that about the provider, but really using that vehicle to maintain connection, because connection was maintained before through typical social avenues, right? You'd go in, I'd visit mom, we'd sit down, we'd have lunch. There was family, monthly family events. There was all these gatherings, and we really can't do that right now. It's just not an option. And we don't know when we're going to be able to again. And so I think that connection piece, it gives me peace of mind. And even more than that. So we've heard a lot of the, thank you so much, the peace of mind, but we've also heard my mom's still doing things. It's like, I need the peace of mind, but I need one step further. I need to know my mom's living her life still, because like you said, it's not just safety and security. I think now there's an expectation that it's also enjoyment and that life is still happening. And so when you use a technology like Sagely, the wonderful thing I love is it's not that difficult to actually maintain the connection. So I'm doing my day-to-day stuff as an engagement director, and it's a simple, like I've got my smart device and I just tap, 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 tap. It's literally that quick, a tap of the finger. When I do that, if you're a family member, so Debbie, if you were my family member connected to me, you get a notice. Hollie's in yoga. You get a picture of me doing my yoga class. And immediately, because it's a push notice to your phone, it's like, mom's good. I can breathe easy now. And I think we all need to breathe a little easier right now. So it really helps to foster that maintained connection. And also it helps you, I think, from a marketing perspective, it helps you to say, I promised you this before you moved in, right? Because we do this courting process, right? There's a courting that happens. And there's nothing worse than being courted and then you get married and they're like, you don't get flowers anymore, right? Like, I liked those flowers. I want them back. Don't stop giving the flowers after somebody moves in, right? So to me, the Sagely's kind of the flowers. It's like, I keep giving you, I said I was going to do this and I'm doing it. And here's like the proof in the pudding. And I do think there's something really important about that. It was important before COVID, but what happened with COVID is people said, oh, this is now a requirement. I actually think that's the switch. It used to be a nice to have because, I had this for, 6 years before COVID, but now I think it's actually, you have to even the playing field. If you don't have this and your competitor does, I got to tell you, I think you're going to struggle. I think you're going to struggle. And I think they're going to pick the person that can maintain that connection.
Yeah, it's funny how many people just volunteered that added value. It gave them peace. And it was funny. This one woman said, what it does is it helps me understand that my mom's not just content, because I don't want to settle for content, but she's thriving. And she knows she's thriving because throughout the day, up pop these messages and it's a picture of her mom. And it was interesting too, because a different family had made a comment to me about the activity calendars. And she said, I went to visit other communities and they had all these great calendars, but they didn't really do the activities. And I
Yeah.
was like, really?
Yeah. Yeah. Isn't
and
that
and they
funny?
knew this, and they actually deliver, because I can see that they're delivering these programs. So it's not
Sure.
just a nice calendar that people are making stuff up and then not following through with.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. And do you feel like there's people are getting more comfortable around the technology? We've always been high touch, not high tech,
Yeah.
and trying to get community teams to really adopt technology
Yeah.
has been a little bit of a
It
challenge.
has.
So
Yeah.
how do you kind of overcome that, or what have your learnings been around the best way to support technology adoption?
Yeah. So I think that what I've noticed is that people are less focused on limitations and they're more focused on possibility because of COVID. So I hope that stays, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
historically, I think sometimes we were the barrier to technology, maybe even more so than the resident themselves, right? Because we were like, well,
Yeah.
my residents will never do insert whatever it is. They're never going to use
Yep.
the computer. They're never going to have a tablet. Oh, an app, they're never going to do that. And what we found is that's actually it's not true.
Yeah.
And so I do think that that's changed. I think from a best practice standpoint, you've got to know what your goals are going in. So the orgs that we've been most successful with this year, especially this particular year, where there's so many priorities and everybody's exhausted, right? I mean, it's been a tough
Yeah.
year for senior housing. The folks who've rolled out with us this year and said, this is a priority for us, they came in with goals. And so sometimes that goal is, I want that family connection. And so we're able
Mm-hmm.
to support it through training, adoption metrics, ongoing, support, and really say, okay, so let's measure it. Let's get focused on that. So I think it's really understanding what your goals are. How are you going to measure those goals? How are you going to hold your team accountable to those goals? And why does it matter? And you just described why it matters, right? Because
Yeah.
families are looking for it. And I think if we
Mm-hmm.
do all of those things, then we see these organizations have the results that you're talking about, because they had a clear goal in mind. Some organizations come to us and they're like, well, we have a technology, but it's not meeting our needs because we're missing this piece. And maybe that's the case here. They were missing that family touch piece, and it was so important to have. And
Yeah.
so they do a really good job of saying, this is our goal, and then we can support the goal. So I think that's a really important component. And then again, just being open. I will say one of the things I love about Sagely, because there is still a reality that you're going to have residents who are not interested in technology, or maybe cognitively they're not able to download an app and interact in a way that's
Mm-hmm.
going to be conducive with a positive outcome for them. So we've also seen people use sort of traditional methods to meet residents' needs. So we've seen the newsletter become interactive, which I love. So how
Yeah.
the newsletter used to be like, update from the executive director, a couple pictures. It's
Mm-hmm.
all past, right? It's everything that happened last month.
Last month. Yeah.
Now we've seen people put trivia in. They're doing Sudoku, they're doing word search, they're doing journaling. I mean, they're doing all these interactive pieces so that they're meeting that resident's needs, who says, you know what, I really don't want to do the app. They're not left behind either. So I think it's that creativity, it's
Mm-hmm.
that really being open to possibilities and really supporting your teams and saying, what creative ideas do you have, and how can technology support those? Technology, in my opinion, in senior housing, you're never replacing human touch. I do not believe that's possible. I still think we're a human business. Technology just enables the human to do their job better. That's all it does. It doesn't replace it. So I hope that people, and I think we've seen that people are more open to that today than they were pre-COVID.
That's awesome. So in terms of, you have such a global view, being able to kind of go in and get all this data right on your back end to
Yeah.
take a look at what are the most popular, what are the types of activities that have the highest engagement. Do you have kind of that top 5 or top 10 list of what's engaging people today? And then on the product side, how are you preparing for the next generation? Because we're going from this silent kind of go along, get along generation into the baby boom, have it your way kind of mindset. So maybe you can talk a little bit about, your product and feature development, and then also just what are residents engaging with today, and then what's on your future roadmap?
Yeah. So residents are still engaging with some of the traditional things that, I think sometimes as marketers and providers, we don't love, but they love, residents love them. So I'm like, just listen, they like it. So we still see a lot of bingo.
Yeah.
That's still a very popular one. I've seen physical fitness, all kinds, not a particular physical fitness, but I've seen that really take a stronger spot in terms of how people are engaging and how frequently it's offered. Because I think people are realizing you've got to keep, the body moving. For COVID, we've also seen a lot more of those like sort of hybrid programs where there's the hallway program or there's the program that's, in the courtyard, but you're still participating. Music is still a great way to reach people. And I think it always will be, right? I mean, no matter where you are cognitively or your age, like music just speaks to us in a different way. Definitely more in art and in fine art. So moving away from like the traditional sort of craft, but really starting to think about the photographer and, residents leading podcasts and residents blogging and being more creative with how we're reaching folks with the art. So thinking broader than just, maybe design art or crafting or things like that. So I'm seeing more people, think about those types of activities, and then starting to really think about purpose. So more and more opportunities to give back or volunteer, whether that's through volunteerism to the staff themselves or outside of the community. And I do think for a broader focus on that is really important because it increases that sense of purpose that we all need. And so I think just continuing that has been really a positive thing to see as well. In terms of our adaptation and technology, one of the things is, of course, continuing to think about how we reach the resident directly, but then also, a primary focus for 2021 for us is going to be around AI and really starting to incorporate, you said it yourself, right? We have all this amazing data and we're collecting data all the time on residents. And so I have a real passion for, and so does our CEO, this idea of starting to help the communities use artificial intelligence to predict what they should be doing and what is the most popular for the residents. And then also at the same time, maybe prompting the resident, just like maybe when you log onto your Netflix account or, if you're using Hulu or whatever, if you watch this, you might like this, starting to do that. Hey, you went to this, you went to yoga, you might be interested in Tai Chi. And so starting to use that predictive piece to optimize programs. So we're not reliant on who's in the community. We're not reliant on turnover. We're not, we're really able to provide the optimal program for the residents living in the community at that time with less human intervention. And I think that's going to help to create more consistent outcomes and help communities to develop better programming.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So people can almost look ahead based on the current interests of their residents and find other things that might be relatable, and then start creating their own roadmap to how to enhance that. So how do you go about kind of customizing it for each group? Every community is different. They all have their own personalities and different personas. So where does that start? And then how do you kind of use this platform and the data that you're collecting? I don't know whether you're building life stories or you're importing things for the CRM, but how does the customization work?
Yeah, so we do have life stories and we're actually enhancing that piece quite a bit right now. And that's going to launch in early January because using my background, I'm like, let's get as much robust information as we possibly can. And that piece is starting to become interactive. So the resident can add to it via their app. The family can add to it via their app. And then we, as the provider can add to it as well. So we're really going to start collecting data from 3 different points to get that super robust information. So we want to look at, and how we start to think about the AI piece is looking at multiple things. So we want to look at what are the things that we know need to be incorporated, at least offered, whether or not you participate in them, offered to create, a wellness-based program. So we want to incorporate those things. And then looking at the personal interests and hobbies is important. So having that robust profile, which is why we've built that new framework. So we're collecting everything from interests and hobbies and all based off of different dimensions as well. So what do you like to do physically? What do you like to do intellectually? What do you like to do in the creative space? So we're starting to collect all of that in a more robust way. And then the other piece is looking at attendance. So, okay, I like this, but do I actually go to it? Important.
Yeah.
And then also starting to ask questions around your social norms. Are you somebody who likes to go to small group activities, large group activities, be one-on-one, and then using the machine learning and AI to start to pull all of those different pieces in to answer specific questions. So that's really the vision, is that we'll start to, and it'll get more robust over time. But the great thing about incorporating machine learning and AI is that the system will get smarter over time. So as new people move in, it starts to look at those points for them. So it's going to start to provide auto customization without you having to go back and look. Because I think what happens sometimes is we struggle to know how to personalize something for 100 people. And I understand why that's hard, right? So if you start to get information about trends and common interests, and it's sort of fed to you, it makes that process just that much easier, because you don't want to lose that piece, right? You want to make sure you're still personalizing, but technology, again, can enable that human to be able to say, okay, so now I have this information. Debbie likes, she likes photography, and I have 5 other residents who like photography. So now maybe I'm going to offer a fine arts photography class because I'm going to meet those needs. So I think that part is super important. And then I think it's going to be one of those things, Debbie, that from a marketing perspective, having a calendar, particularly not necessarily in memory care, because there's a different rhythm and routine you have to really abide by to support the resident. But in AL and IL, I do believe we're going to get to a more choice-based calendaring system, meaning it's not going to be okay anymore to say at 9:00, everybody comes to, yoga class.
Coffee and conversation.
9:30, coffee and conversation. 10:00, we have lunch. No, residents are going to want more options. So I also am hoping that technology, that enabling the AI piece and machine learning is going to provide people with enough information to start to think in more small groups. So maybe I have 10 small groups, and all 5 of those, it's a choice. Like 9:00, you can do yoga, or you can be part of the running club. 10:00, you have these 2 options. So it starts to create a better experience for the residents, where you're meeting more people's needs than you were before.
Yeah, because with just one activity director, they have their skill set and they have their personal interests. And, you kind of understand why every week do they just repeat the same calendar over and over and over again, because it's really hard. You can't bring people in right now from outside. So you have to kind of stay within whatever the skill set is of that one activity director, and that's very limited. So is there right now, or is there on your roadmap, the ability to have, for your example, like for me, I love photography. Well, maybe the activity director has never taken a picture, except with her phone. And so she can't give me that experience. Is it something that if there was a local photography shop or an instructor at a community college or something that could do a small group, that they could use your technology so you can create more kind of interactive live remote learning? Or I was even thinking, I was talking to a client yesterday that has like 9 communities all in the same city.
Yeah.
And we were talking about how do we create this connection so you could physically live in, this one community, but this community over here is doing this very cool thing. They have a great culinary thing or something. Is that on your roadmap, or is that something that's going on right now?
Yeah, so through the dedicated cable channel, so your community TV channel, you can live stream. So typically people are using, like a YouTube Live type of platform, but definitely, that's where you could have that instructor come in and do that live programming. And then all the residents do is turn to channel 2, and magically everything's there just from that YouTube Live. They don't have to think about, how do I log into the computer, and do I have an account for this? And it just shows up on the TV. So you definitely can do that. You can do that right now. You could also, do a movie for everybody right now and say, okay, I'm gonna play the movie on that channel. And then you can also do the content piece. So like I said, the trivia, or share happy birthdays, or the menu, so there's a lot of really robust options there. In terms of content, I definitely have a passion for starting to create our, partnerships for content within Sagely, and not only deliver them through the TV, because I do think that that's important, but I do think, and I see this with our, with our adoption of the resident app, that I want to start to offer some of that on demand to the resident as well. Because I think you talked about preparing for the future resident. We're all on demand people, right? Like I have time for it when I have time for it. That schedule thing, it'd be nice, but I can't do that. But I love to be able to have my fitness on demand, or I love my TED Talk when I want to listen to it, or whatever it might be. So we're looking at how could we deliver that to the resident in the app, and then be able to sort of track that as well. Because that's engagement, right? If I love listening to a lifelong learning lecture and it's available to me, and I can just look at it through, through that partnership, that's just as important as attending, a large group, if that's my preference. So that's definitely on our roadmap. And we've started those conversations this year. It's about I think a lot of it for us is picking the right partners. And I know, the value of this, but really picking the right partners to make sure that it stays, the content stays true to our mission and what we're trying to do, and that it's really quality for the life enrichment directors, engagement directors who are going to be using it and delivering the programs. So, yeah.
Lots of good stuff on the horizon.
Yeah.
Well, in marketing, I guess the last topic I'd love to cover is how do we use a platform like this to engage people who are not yet in your community? Because I always feel like the opportunity is for those people that are sitting on the fence, from a marketing perspective, they have a need, they've started to look, they've toured your community, and then they just kind of go dormant. They just get quiet. And, how do we kind of get people feeling like they have a sense of belonging to my community before they move in, so that they can kind of get this, this is what my day would be like. These are the kind of people who live here. Oh, look at what they're doing. That's so interesting. What am I doing today? But can they, is there a way for them to join in virtually, or is that something you're looking at doing?
So I think you definitely could add them to the app. So having the resident, as a prospect, or, a potential resident, just, having the appropriate status. They're not actively living in the community, but, and then they could log into the app. They could get messages from you in there. They could see the calendar, even you could do some teasers, have them RSVP for upcoming events, and, just keep in touch that way. So they see what's happening in the community. And then I do, it's funny because you and I had chatted a little bit about this in the past. So I talked with our team, and I'm like, how could you do it in an individual, in a home in the same way? And so I do think it would be possible with the cable piece, but I think really for us, it's going to be continuing through the app, because I think that's going to be the easiest way to reach residents and to make it adoptable. And then the great thing is, if they already have an account and they move into the community, you just change the status and then they're used to it. And I do think there's something really important about, okay, so now I see, I want that for lunch. That looks great, and I want to go to that trivia class. And then Hollie sent me a message and said, there's this thing coming up down the road. And so I maintain that connection, and that interest is piqued on a regular basis. And because you can direct message, they're going to get that notification that you have one new message in your, in your app. So I think there's a lot of creative ways to use the technology. And then I also think, again, going back to that resident who maybe isn't tech savvy, like creating that interactive newsletter, I still think is a really great way to reach the resident who's maybe not quite ready to log into the app, and mail it to them every month. Like keep touching them, but don't just mail like what we did last month, but, mail some interaction, and maybe even have, a trivia contest, and they have to mail it back to you. And, there's still something about, utilizing the whole platform that I think is really important. But I do think the app is great. And you may even be able to start to use the family piece like that too, if the family is the decision maker, so they could see what you have going on, right? So you could, in theory, definitely add, Debbie, and then add, Debbie's mom in there, and then connect you to, so you could also see, what the calendar looks like, what the meals look like, what messages are coming through. And it gives you that real world experience, which I think is going to be, again, that differentiator. So I hope that people start to think about the marketing journey and the move-in process really being that engagement centric, because I firmly believe now with COVID and even before that wellness safety piece is the cost of admission. If you cannot prove to me that you can do that well, forget it. But now I do think there's going to be this hyper focus on the engagement piece, because we've seen how detrimental isolation is for seniors and what it's
Yeah.
done to seniors to remain isolated. So I think you've got to be able to show from, just my inquiry phase all the way through and beyond move in, that we mean it. Engagement matters. We're going to keep your loved one engaged. And we probably don't have time to get into this, but you could also even start to talk about how are you going to measure the wellness? And that's the other thing I love about Sagely is being able to take wellness assessments. So Debbie moves in, we do a baseline WHO-5 well-being index. We know her well-being score. And then 6 months later, wouldn't it be great to go back to the family and say, hey, we improved your mom's well-being score. And here's how, with all these programs. And I do think all of those things pulled together are going to make a prospect say, you know what, that's the group I want to work with. They really get it. They get what my mom.
Absolutely. Because I think, you have to, promises are one thing, but proof is something very different. And a lot of people get caught up in kind of the marketing, the aspirational marketing messages, but operationally you have to be able to deliver that and, just for integrity and, for your brand. So I think from a marketing perspective, I mean, I would love if somebody like came to tour and brought their tablet and I could like install the app and like show them how to do it. And then say, hey, when you get home, there's going to be a message from me. And I'm going to send you the things I think you'd really like. My mom's 88. She's completely addicted to her iPad. Like it's the one thing that you cannot take away from her.
Sure.
So, I think it's really cool to have people feel like they have a sense of belonging to a community before they actually move in. And in terms of a differentiator, those are those wow experiences.
Yeah. And I mean, imagine how you could be helping too until they make that decision, because they might look forward to that message. That was something really funny that we heard from residents who started the in-room TV. So we had a group of communities started the in-room TV, and they were doing these virtual programs through the TV. So and some of them were just pre-recorded. They weren't necessarily live, but there was one where they did a virtual tulip festival, and it was it was early on in COVID. And it was actually something that that community group had always done every year. They took the residents in person, and there's a huge festival. So they did it virtually this year. And the director reached out to us, and I chuckled, and she said, well, the only problem I'm having is I don't update this content every day. The residents are screaming at me. And I was like, yes. So that's a huge win, right? Like, let's keep doing that. So I think you're right. Residents are looking, they're paying attention, they're using the iPad, they're watching that content, and they're just waiting for us to deliver on it. So if we can do that, it's a wow. And, it is. Marketing it is great, but if it's not alive in the community, and I've always said this with philosophies that I've written and programs I've written, the program can be wonderful on paper, but if it's not alive in the community, it doesn't matter.
Right.
It's all for naught. At the end of the day, it has to be alive in the community. So I think technology helps us to bring programs alive at home through the prospect journey, when somebody moves in, and beyond. And I think that's where we're at. We need to be able to deliver on our promises. And it would be better to maybe market a little bit more, less grand and more, here's really what you can expect from us, and deliver on that every time. I can see that being important. So if you really are going to message me monthly, then tell me that. If I'm going to get those check-ins, tell me that, because I want to be able to count on that. And I hope that people really do think about that connection piece as the center of their marketing moving forward, because I think it's going to be, huge for families in making that decision.
Oh, perfect. Well, I think that is a great place to end. And I know we have a webinar that we have scheduled. So maybe we can get into more of the wellness and the health and well-being and measuring the impact on the webinar. But Hollie, thank you so much for sharing your senior living marketing perspectives with us today. And if people want to learn about Sagely or connect with you, what's the best way for them to find you?
Yeah, so you can visit our website, www.gosagely.com. And of course, you can find me on LinkedIn if you'd like to connect with me directly.
That's great. We'll have all that information in the show notes, and we're looking forward to chatting with you more during our webinar.
Thank you, Debbie.
Thanks, Holly. Bye.